Hello everybody and welcome to Whatever Floats Your Boat. The reason why I'm doing this is because my man is currently watching Formula One, which is like the most boring sport I've ever watched, apart from like cycling races like Giro d'Italia and Tour de France. I think that's like, honestly, for me it would be more interesting to watch like grass growing than to, watch this. Anyway, the reason why I'm doing this short video is because I'm currently reading a book by one of my favourite experts in education, who is Ken Robinson. And I bought two books of him, and I'm currently reading The Element. So The Element, How Finding Your Passion Changes Everything. I haven't finished it, but I have watched his TED Talks, and I have, as I said, I finished half of the book, and I can already conclude that it's just brilliant, and that I love it, and that I feel like finally someone is saying what I've been feeling and thinking for like a long time, and now someone is kind of expressing it in a more expert way. So the book is about, generally, it is like a cluster of stories from people who have found their element, as well as Robinson's thoughts of how to, find your element and which factors may obstruct you from finding it. It's very interesting, and you should definitely read it. So what he basically says is that every person is born with an innate power or talent, which he calls the element. So it's like being in your element. And it's absolutely fantastic because I so completely share his beliefs. I think that so many people in this world, and I'm not speaking about generally the world, but also in like the civilized, educated world, or the Western world, as some may call it, so many people are unhappy, although they don't lack any sort of material like items, but still they seem to be very unfulfilled. And I just feel like that 95% of the people, if not even more, just don't do what they should be doing for various reasons. They may be cultural, they may be personal, they may be circumstantial. But the fact is that many people don't do that. And I think the most frightening thing about all of this is that people take it for granted now, and they don't even fight for, getting better at this. I mean, most people that I know, they live for the weekends. They don't really enjoy their jobs, and they don't really look forward to going to their jobs every day. And waiting for the weekend is like what they do. And I think that is pretty sad, considering how much time you spend daily at your job, to think that you are not really enjoying it, and that it doesn't really tickle your fancies, and that you don't really feel like you're achieving or accomplishing anything that is really dear to you. And as I've been on like a constant quest to find my element and ways to express it, I've been very interested by this, and very intrigued. But I feel like many people don't feel intrigued by this subject. They rather avoid it and just keep like going with whatever makes them unhappy. And I think it's so great because in this book you find people who, I think when you find your element, there is no turning back from it. I don't think you can find what really floats your boat and what really makes you happy and just turn away and say, no, I'm just going to continue the way I did before. Unless you're a real masochist and idiot, because I think it's really a blessing in this world to find what you're good at and do it as well. And be passionate about it. I mean, not being good at something does not necessarily mean that you're passionate about it. So that's one thing to consider. All right. In this book, there is also a little passage that I'm probably going to just read you excerpts from, which talks about the career of Ariana. What is she called? Ariana Stasinopoulos, who later on became Arianna Huffington, who is now the editor and founder of Huffington Post. So she's had a very successful life, and she grew up in Greece. And she once saw a picture in a catalogue, and it was a picture of Cambridge, and she was like, this is the school I want to go to. And everyone laughed at her for this. except for her mother, who said, okay, let's see whether this is possible. And in the end, Ariana ended up being in Cambridge, being one of the most talented and successful female students, who was also the president of the debate club, and she was the first woman to do it. And Cambridge Union Debating Society, this is what it is. And she writes about that, especially for women. She feels like that they still have this need to get approval. And I have to say, I still have to admit that this is partly true. And what she writes is, I'm struck by how often, when I ask women to blog for the Huffington Post, they had a hard time trusting that what they had to say was worthwhile, even established writers. So often, I think, we as women stop ourselves from trying because we don't want to risk failing. We put such a premium on being approved of, we become reluctant to take risks. And I find this to be a very, very true and very sad statement that women should probably work on and at least consider. Because I would say it is true in most cases that women are less eager to take risks, or less eager to put themselves in a position where they might fail, or you could probably just say are less daring than men in many aspects. But I also think this is partly because of feminism, because of this sisterhood of feminism, which I'm not denouncing as a bad thing, but I think it can be very oppressive at some times. If you fail as a woman, you don't only fail as a woman, but you fail as like in the whole context of feminism and, you know, women in the workplace. And I think that's a very oppressive thought, you know, to think I don't only fail on my in my own aspects and in my own life, but I fail standing for something that is important for me. And I think that is something that definitely needs to be changed, and that women have to kind of also sever themselves from. I think we are individuals. We can form a sisterhood to achieve the same goals, but we shouldn't be deterred from taking up risks and being prepared to fail, thinking that that will make the whole range of like femininity and women in the workplace fail. Because this is like a burden that you just cannot carry. It's absolutely impossible. And so, yeah, I think that is a crucial point in, like, you know, this burden of sisterhood and femininity in feminism, which can be very, very, very difficult, like, cross to bear and to carry. I thought it was a very striking thought. I am a woman, so that's probably why it is striking to me. And and I've thought about it a lot, because I am someone who is absolutely terrified by the thought of failing at something, which I'm working on currently, because I think it's not healthy, because you cannot not fail at some point. You know, it's just inevitable. And I think, and I've read another quote the other day, which was very interesting. I'm just trying to think of it at the moment. Goodness, what was it? For those who plan, like, the more detailed you plan, the harder you're struck by coincidence. And I was like, that is so true. You know, you cannot plan your life. You cannot foresee the future. It's just, I mean, I'm not saying you should, you know, throw everything out of the window and live a reckless life. But I think to some extent you have to accept that you're out of control. And you have to accept that you eventually will fail at something, even if you are meant to do it. And I think that failing is a very crucial part of every process, which I think is very interesting, because when you think at, like, for example, like science, failing is not as severely, like, it is not such a severe case as in like normal life. In science, you actually assume that you will fail at some point. You know, you try a theory and you fail, and you try another experiment and you fail again, and then you alter like the parameters, and then there we go, and then you get to a result that you're happy with. And this is how it should be, you know, in real life as well. I mean, just because you failed doesn't mean that you suck at this. It just means that you haven't found the way to do it properly, and you have to keep looking. But of course, in our school system, and I know I'm repeating myself here, but Ken Robinson is saying the same. In our school system, every mistake you do is immediately punished, and you hardly ever get a chance to, redo it or try it again or find different ways to do it. It's just, there's this one chance, and if you've blown it, that's just it, and it's gone forever. And this is not how life should be, and it's definitely not good soil for creativity, to thrive and to flourish. So yeah. So my point being here today, to finish off this video, is read this book and watch Ken Robinson's TED Talk. It's hilarious. He's amazing. And if you're unhappy with our current school system, and if you want to know what's wrong with it, he really gives a good summary of it. Secondly, if you're a woman, don't feel oppressed by this idea of feminism, that you have to be always this feminist item that has to fight for feminism. But you can also fail on your own scale, and you can be fine with it, and you don't have to always stand up for everyone else. And yes, I think that's all that I had to say for today. And we'll see what else is coming up in the next days.